you felt like an outside. You sort of always felt like an outsider in your life, and that got replicated in group, and it got replicated because you were a different color than everybody else, and so you sort of had your own, mishigas making that happen. But you also had some very reality-based things making that happen too, and I think that occurs in our group as well. But it's hard to talk about one without getting, race involved.
Defensive and aggressive or angry, inwardly angry, when people would assume that I had something to say that was unique or different, and when in fact I was probably a little.
You mean just because you were black?
Yeah. In my experience coming through the 60s, being on the campuses, and I was at the March on Washington, Dr. King's incredible speech, mountaintop speech, and
wow, that's wonderful. It's a part of history.
I have had. It was interesting that my motivation for going may have more to do with being able to ride down on a bus from Brooklyn with a beautiful young
just
lady.
wanted to get laid.
Well, the fact was we had to leave at a certain hour of the morning. That meant that I'd have to stay with her that night in order to catch a bus from Brooklyn. So I ended up at the March on Washington. But that's not the first time things have happened to me, Wayne, that have happened in spite of me, not because of me. It's wonderful to have that piece of history, but the serendipity of how it all happened is just emblematic of a lot of things, a lot of the richness of my experience over the years.
I'm sorry, you just talked a little bit about the March on Washington? How was it?
Most of my memory is a videotape memory because I was a little mood altered, shall we say. I remember trying to climb a tree for a vantage point. But what I remember that I talk about most is coming back after a day of elevation and almost a euphoric sense that wasn't duplicated for me until a guy makes a speech in Chicago about 8 years ago accepting the nomination to be the President of the United States. Well, it was kind of in that spirit that on the way back up Route 95, our bus full of people from Brooklyn were denied service at the Howard Johnson coming back up I-95 from the March on Washington. That's what I remember about
this.
This
is 68, 67?
Probably 67 or 66.
67. Yeah. And coming up Interstate 95.
Yeah. We'd been on these stinking buses for a very long time. We had this uplifting, wonderful experience of the day. And then to get slapped back into the reality that someplace in Maryland decides that we're not going to be served as we're heading north back to New York. But social activism was alive in a way that it was kind of an Arab Spring in my sense. When I saw that happen in the Middle East, it reminded me of a momentum that was brought up. And I thought the Trayvon Martin thing would come back in some form. I thought our country's Arab Spring would be motivated by economic injustice, that people in an act-up kind of a way would have their voices known. But it may be
Occupy Wall Street sort of touched a bit of that.
Yeah, it really did. And I thought that people's pushback against manipulative soundbite kind of manipulation would be in the form of economic injustice. But the recent court verdict in Florida makes me wonder if maybe this might get some momentum from a place other than just economic injustice. So the chance to talk to you about it today was gratefully received and welcomed. And it makes me think that in a community where we're not talking enough about it, maybe I'll have a bit more of a voice about it. I don't know exactly how, Wayne. In thinking about Simba's questions for me today, and you coming to be her mouthpiece, so to speak, I didn't really have a lot to say to you about my clinical knowledge or my clinical expertise, because it really just comes from being the recipient of a lot of good services, a lot of good clinical and group services. And I know what that is like, and I know what happens in the room when those things take place, and I know what people need to do and say to have that happen. But I don't know why or how to label that. It just I kind of have that understanding, and I'm trusting that intuition, and I'm lightening up on trying to have mastery of it to be able to articulate and explain it.